You drive 10 long hours, carrying a velvet box with your family's heirloom inside jewelry, meant to be handed to your sister on her wedding day, a wedding you paid for. The dress, the venue, the grand celebration, all covered by your savings and your trust. Yet when you finally arrive at the hotel, everything shatters with one cold reply. "Oh, we had it yesterday. Just family." In that moment, you realize that family doesn't always mean appreciation. Tonight's story reveals a painful truth, but also an awakening about loyalty, respect, and learning where to draw the line. If you enjoy heartfelt family stories filled with lessons and emotion, a gentle like and subscribe will make sure you never miss what comes next. You've always been the quiet architect of other people's joy. Birthdays, graduations, anniversaries, behind every effortless celebration was your late nights, your careful planning, your money stretched thinner than it should have been. No one saw the sacrifices, but you didn't mind. You believed family was worth it. As children, you and your sister sat under the Arizona sky, counting stars as if they were promises. You whispered to each other that nothing could break your bond. Back then, love felt unshakable. She was the spark that lit up every room, and you were the steady flame that kept burning beside her. But time changes people. The long conversations became short, clipped messages. "Can you cover the deposit?" Close quote, and each time, you told yourself it was temporary stress. Weddings are overwhelming, you thought. Love explains the silence, and trust covers the doubts. You eyed the money, pressed confirm, close quote, and imagined the gratitude you would see on her wedding day. Overtime shifts piled up. Vacations disappeared. Dreams of your own were quietly set aside. Every dollar went to her dream dress, the rooftop venue, the champagne that would sparkle in the glasses of guests you had never even met. You told yourself it would all be worth it when she turned to you, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." The day you drove to Denver, the velvet box in the passenger seat carried more than a necklace and earrings. It carried years of trust, belief, and unspoken promises. The hotel glowed with chandeliers and music, as if it were the threshold of a new beginning. But the glowing sign outside the ballroom read Wilson and Carter Celebration. Not your sister's name. Not your story. Still, you chose hope over evidence. You called her, smiling through the nerves. And her reply came clean, sharp, unflinching. "Oh, we had it yesterday. Just family." Those 3 words, just family, cut deeper than any blade. You had given her your savings, your energy, your heart. Yet you were not family. You stood frozen, the ballroom laughter fading into dull hum, as if the world had suddenly stepped away from you. You didn't make a scene. You didn't demand the necklace be acknowledged. You walked away, because walking was the only way to keep what little dignity you had left. Outside, the neon lights of Denver blurred into one harsh truth. Sometimes the people you sacrifice the most for are the ones who see you as the easiest to erase. The drive back to Tucson felt endless. The velvet box sat silent beside you, a witness to your betrayal. But inside you, something shifted. Not just pain, something sharper, something awake. At home, you opened your laptop and logged into the joint account you had set up for her wedding expenses. You weren't looking for proof of betrayal. You were looking for answers. The balance stared back nearly zero. Scrolling through the transactions, your breath caught. There was the $4,000 wedding dress, the $7,500 rooftop venue, the $3,200 catering package. But woven among them were charges that had nothing to do with vows or rings. Nearly $3,000 at a luxury boutique, a $1,500 spa weekend in Aspen, $4,200 in flights to Miami, all under her name. You dug deeper. The pattern was undeniable. Designer sunglasses, a $900 steakhouse dinner, even $600 to a personal stylist. Your savings hadn't gone into a wedding. They had gone into her lifestyle, her image, her illusion of success. You opened a spreadsheet, listing every dollar. The so-called wedding costs totaled over $20,000. The luxury splurges added another $15,000. And then you saw the receipts she'd sent you, labeled as vendor deposits. Lies. A florist deposit was really a custom leather jacket. An event decor fee turned out to be a high-end watch. Each lie was another brick in the wall she had built between you. Each transfer of your money was another reminder that she hadn't just stolen from your wallet, she had stolen from your trust. Memories flashed. Her hurried texts, her promises to pay you back later. But later never came. Later was a fairy tale. The pain hardened into clarity. Love had blinded you, but now your eyes were wide open. She hadn't just leaned on you, she had calculated every step, knowing you would never say no. And then the phone rang. Aunt Judith's voice carried a weight you weren't ready for. Calm, serious, she told you the truth no one else had dared to say. Your sister had poured money into a failing bar in Denver. Not just her money, loans from private lenders, the kind of debts that didn't wait politely. She's been dodging payments for months, close quote, Judith warned. You froze. The puzzle pieces clicked together. The urgency, the endless one more thing, the extravagant spending. It wasn't about a wedding. It was about covering the cracks in life she couldn't afford. You thought of Chloe, her 4-year-old daughter with eyes too bright to understand darkness. Chloe, who clutched your hand every time you visited, who giggled when you read her bedtime stories. She was innocent in this storm. And yet, if you kept bailing her mother out, Chloe would never see a different way. The choice before you was brutal but clear. Keep feeding the cycle until you had nothing left, or draw a line that could not be crossed. You realized then that sacrifice without respect is just waste, and forgiveness without change is just repetition. For the first time in years, you chose yourself. You closed the account. You kept the heirloom safe. You promised yourself that your love would go to the right place from now on. Chloe would get your protection, your support. But Ivy would not. Because love without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. And when the world came crashing in, when social media posts painted you as selfish, when strangers judged without knowing the truth, you stayed quiet. You knew the facts, and the facts were enough. This wasn't just the end of your sister's illusion. It was the beginning of your own awakening. If this story stirs something inside you, if you've ever carried the weight of family only to find yourself cast aside, then you know how powerful boundaries can be. And if you'd like to hear how this journey unfolds, gently tap like or subscribe. Is a simple way to walk this path together, one truth at a time. After hanging up with Aunt Judith, you sat frozen, realizing the world had tilted in a way you weren't ready for. The money you had sacrificed, long hours, missed vacations, years of savings hadn't just gone into a wedding. It had been poured into a failing bar in Denver, a reckless gamble your sister sold as her ticket to success. High-interest loans, impatient lenders, debts circling like vultures. That was the truth behind the glossy photos she paraded online. You remembered those posts all too well. Cocktails on rooftops, designer dresses, captions about living the dream. At the time, you thought she was simply celebrating the journey toward her wedding. Now you saw it clearly. It had been camouflage for a crumbling reality. The anger inside you shifted into something heavier. Worry. Not for her, but for Chloe. That bright-eyed little girl, only 4 years old, whose laughter had always been pure, untouched by the mess adults created. You knew that whatever choice you made, she was the one who mattered most. Then came the call. Her name flashed across your phone, and when you answered, her voice poured out in panic. The house has no electricity, no water, not even Wi-Fi. Did you send the money? We can't survive like this. Her words weren't a plea. They were an expectation, almost a demand. After years of rescuing her, she had come to assume you'd step in without hesitation. But not this time. You had closed the joint account that very morning. You had told yourself that kindness without limits only becomes fuel for manipulation. That old refrain, just this once, I'll pay you back, had become meaningless. And now, your reply was steady, sharper than she expected. Remember what you said in Denver? Just family. Well, I'm remembering that now. On the other end, silence stretched long. For the first time, your sister had no quick words to twist the story. But she didn't give up. The next day, her battlefield moved online. She posted a long, emotional rant, tagging your name for the world to see. Some people turn their backs on family when they need help the most, she wrote. Even my own sister abandoned us. What about her niece? Doesn't she matter? The comments poured in. Relatives, old friends, strangers all chimed in with judgments. How could you do this? Family comes first. Your face burned as you read, but the sting wasn't guilt. It was fury. Not once did she mention the $35,000 you had given. Not once did she confess to the designer bags, the spa retreats, the flights, or the failing bar. In her carefully crafted story, she was the victim, and you were the villain. You almost fired back, tempted to post every receipt, every statement, every truth. But you stopped yourself. Exposing her lies would only drag you into her chaos. You didn't need to convince the world. You only needed to hold on to your truth. That afternoon, there was a knock at your door. When you opened it, Andrew, your sister's husband, stood there. His jacket was wrinkled, his eyes red with exhaustion. Hazel, he said softly, I owe you a thank you. For everything you did. And for what I didn't see until now. You led him to the kitchen table, listening as he unraveled the story. Endless nights of debt collectors calling, utility companies cutting them off, investors breathing down their necks. Ivy has always been about appearances, he admitted. She can't accept failure. She hides it, keeps up the image, no matter the cost. His voice carried no request for money, no excuses, only weary honesty. You asked about Chloe, and his face crumpled. She's confused. She doesn't understand why the lights keep going out, why the water doesn't run. I try to keep it normal for her, but it's getting harder. The image cut into you like glass. Chloe's wide eyes, Chloe's smile fading under shadows she never deserved. For the first time in days, your anger softened, replaced by sorrow. Andrew wasn't the architect of this mess. He was trapped in it, just like you had been. And Chloe, innocent Chloe, was caught in the crossfire. So you made a promise. You would help Chloe. School supplies, clothes, tuition, whatever she needed to feel safe and cared for. You also gave Andrew a lead on a job, a way to stand on his own feet again. But you drew the line where it needed to be. Ivy gets nothing. This boundary was ironclad, and for the first time, you felt peace as you spoke it aloud. When Andrew left, gratitude heavy in his tired eyes, your heart carried both weight and relief. You had finally done. And if this chapter resonates with you, if you've ever struggled with where to draw the line in your own family, let this be a reminder. Your voice matters, your boundaries matter. If you'd like to hear how this journey continues, quietly tap like or subscribe. It's a small gesture, but it keeps you close as we walk through the rest of this story together. After that conversation with Andrew, the apartment in Tucson felt strangely quiet. But the quiet didn't last long. Only a few days later, your phone lit up with Ivy's name again. Her voice came sharp, frantic, laced with desperation. "Hazel, you have to help me. Everything's falling apart. They're threatening to take the house, the car. Chloe won't have a place to live. Do you really want to see your niece like this?" Close quote. Her words were daggers, aimed straight at your heart. But this time, you weren't so easily pierced. The image of Chloe still twisted your chest, but you heard the truth beneath the plea. Ivy wasn't taking responsibility. She was still shifting the burden onto you. You drew a long breath, keeping your tone calm. "Ivy, you have to face the consequences of your own choices. I won't let Chloe suffer, but I will not let you use me like an endless bank account anymore." There was silence on the other end, heavy and suffocating until it cracked into anger. Ivy began shouting, dragging childhood memories into the fight. "Have you forgotten? We promised we'd always be there for each other. You're my sister. Family doesn't turn its back." Close quote. You closed your eyes, picturing those nights under the Arizona sky, the two of you whispering promises with laughter tangled in the sound of crickets. Those words had once been sacred. But now, they were weapons. You opened your eyes and said firmly, "Real family doesn't turn love into exploitation." You made your choices, Ivy. And now, I'm making mine. The line went dead. You set the phone down, your hand trembling, but your heart steadier than it had been in years. The next day, the storm found a new stage. Ivy flooded social media with posts painting herself as the abandoned mother, struggling alone in a dark house. Strangers and distant relatives filled the comments with anger aimed at you. Some even messaged privately, calling you heartless. You read their words, a knot tightening in your stomach. But instead of firing back, you stepped away from the screen, out onto the balcony, breathing deeply. You realized the peace you needed wasn't in convincing the world, it was in refusing to be dragged into her chaos. That evening, Andrew called again. His voice carried exhaustion but also something resolute. "Hazel, I filed for divorce. I can't live in these lies anymore. Chloe deserves a stable home." The words sliced through you, sadness for the family breaking apart, but also a fragile sense of relief. At least Andrew was choosing a way out. You opened the safe that night and looked at the velvet box resting inside. The sapphire glimmered, a thread of family history spanning generations. You whispered to yourself, "This is what remains. This is what endures. And it will not be lost." Agreed. You texted Andrew soon after. You promised to help Chloe with tuition, clothes, and the essentials of childhood. You also sent him a lead for a logistics job in Denver, a chance to start over. His reply came quickly, "Thank you, Hazel. I won't let you down." The days that followed revealed a shift inside you. For the first time in years, you woke without the weight of Ivy's demands pressing down. You had space to breathe, to think of yourself. You enrolled in an evening art class, bought a set of paints, and sat down to capture the Tucson sunset on canvas. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a piece of your own life. And with that came something unexpected: relief. You had finally drawn a boundary, and that line was guarding you from being swallowed whole again. Sometimes, word of Ivy still reached you through others. You learned she had sold her house, forced into a small apartment. You pictured her among cardboard boxes, no sparkle, no adoring crowd. A flicker of pity rose and quickly faded. These were the results of her own decisions, not yours. Meanwhile, Andrew settled into the new job. His texts carried gratitude. He told you Chloe had drawn a picture for you: a small house, a blue sky, two people holding hands. Tears pricked your eyes as you smiled. That simple sketch was worth more than all the money you had ever given away. Slowly, life found rhythm again. You joined a volunteer group at a community center, helping children laugh and learn after school. Their joy reminded you of the innocence worth protecting, the kind of love that never manipulates. On a quiet weekend night, you opened your laptop once more, but this time, not to track drained bank accounts. Instead, you searched for design jobs, reigniting the career you had left behind. Fingers flying across the keyboard, you crafted an application, and for the first time in years, hope rose like a flame. You realized life doesn't end at betrayal. Sometimes, it begins there. From the ashes of loss, you can carve a path that is truly your own. And in that moment, you knew. You had finally stepped out of the shadow, into a chapter written not by obligation, but by choice. For years, your life had been defined by others, by their demands, their betrayals, their endless needs. But now, each breath felt like your own, each decision no longer weighed down by someone else's expectations. 2 months later, the news about Ivy reached you through a mutual acquaintance. Just a short, almost careless message. She had to sell the house. You sat at your kitchen table, the early evening light slanting across the room, staring into the distance as if the words carried an echo. The house. The one Ivy once flaunted as her crown jewel. The one glowing in photos plastered all over her social media, a backdrop for parties and curated perfection. That house was gone. The debts from her failed bar venture had finally caught up, pulling her down like an undertow. You could see it in your mind without needing confirmation. Ivy, her once radiant face dimmed, hunched over a desk filled with legal documents, her manicured hand trembling as she signed papers, her voice silent as she slid the keys across a table. The walls that once echoed with laughter, with the music of shallow friends and fleeting admirers, now stood still in silence. She had moved into a cramped apartment, stripped of glamour, stripped of company. The glittering life she had once tried to brand as permanent had proven fragile, as fleeting as smoke. And strangely, your heart felt no rage, no hunger for revenge. There was no sense of victory in her downfall. Instead, a quiet stillness settled over you, like a door inside finally closing. You realized something profound. Life didn't require you to punish her. Her own choices, the pride and illusions she clung to, had already done that. Andrew, meanwhile, was building a steadier story. He took one step at a time, his job at the logistics company stable, bringing a reliable paycheck. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. Every message he sent carried quiet gratitude, words heavy with sincerity. He told you Chloe loved school, her eyes shining each time she showed off her drawings or hugged new books. She drew a picture for you, close quote, Andrew wrote one evening. I'll mail it soon. You smiled at the thought. You pictured her small hands gripping crayons, pressing bright colors into the page, creating a world entirely her own. That picture, to you, was worth more than any treasure. It was a reminder that the hard choices you had made, choices that tore you from old bonds, were shaping a safer, brighter path for her. Ivy still posted online, of course. The habit clung to her like perfume, though its scent had grown stale. She shared photos of coffee mugs, inspirational quotes, a filtered glimpse of her smaller apartment. But now, the responses were sparse. The friends who once cheered under every glamorous post had disappeared, moving on to new lights, fresher stories. Those who once praised her avoided her now, unwilling to be dragged into her downfall. She tried to fish for sympathy, but her voice echoed into near silence. One evening, as you sorted through old boxes in your apartment, you stumbled across the stack of receipts, every record of the money drained away. You flipped through them slowly, each slip of paper carrying its sting. You remember the nights of doubt, the arguments, the tears you swallowed in silence. But this time, the sting was dulled. They were no longer chains binding you to her story. They were simply remnants, relics of a chapter already closed. You tucked the papers into a drawer and locked it, not to forget, but to remind yourself of the lesson. Trust, once broken, could not be handed out blindly again. That drawer was no longer a prison. It was a monument to resilience. The days slipped by, soft yet steady, and you began building yourself anew. Evenings spent painting became a ritual, the brush in your hand no longer a tool for distraction, but an instrument of release. In every stroke of color across the canvas, you rediscovered yourself. The art class of the community center brought new faces and new conversations. These people were not bound by your past. They saw you as you were, not as you had been, and that simple recognition healed parts of you hadn't realized was still fractured. Children's laughter echoed in the air when you volunteered at the center. Their innocent giggles were like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, reminding you of love that asked for nothing in return. With each laugh, with each curious question, the heaviness in your chest lifted. You began to see something Ivy had never understood. Happiness didn't come from validation, applause, or being constantly needed. Happiness grew from knowing when to say enough, and from choosing where your love truly belonged. One morning, as you brewed your coffee, your inbox pinged with an email from the design studio where you had applied weeks earlier. You opened it with trembling hands. They wanted to schedule an interview. For a moment, you froze. The old you would have doubted, would have whispered that you weren't ready, that you had already wasted too many years. But then a smile crept across your face. For years, you had set aside your own ambitions, pouring everything into Ivy's demands, watching your own dreams gather dust. And now, finally, a door was opening for you. The interview took place in a modest office, bright with framed artwork on every wall. The air smelled faintly of coffee and acrylic paint. You sat across from the panel, your heart steady, and spoke of your experience, your passion, the dreams you had once buried but never truly lost. Walking out afterward, you didn't know whether you would get the job, but that hardly mattered. The important thing was that you had dared to try, dared to speak your own truth. Weeks later, the acceptance email arrived. You sat at your kitchen table once again, but this time the morning light spilling across your laptop screen brought joy instead of dread. You weren't opening bank statements drained by someone else's demands. You were opening a new chapter, one that belonged entirely to you. Day by day, you found yourself thriving again. The projects at the studio challenged you, demanded the best of your creativity. Your colleagues valued your ideas, listened to your voice, and respected your perspective. Slowly, your confidence bloomed, not like a fragile flower, but like a tree planting roots deep into the ground. For the first time in years, you weren't carrying someone else's burden, you were carrying your own dreams. Evenings were no longer heavy. You returned to your apartment, painting quietly by the soft glow of a lamp or reading Andrew's updates about Chloe. And then, one night, he finally sent the promised picture. It was a drawing of a woman smiling, holding hands with a little girl beneath a bright yellow sun. The crayon lines were uneven, the colors spilling past the edges, but to you it was perfect. In that drawing, you saw something Ivy had never been able to give you. Love untainted by manipulation, a bond free from conditions. You placed the drawing on your wall, right above your desk. Every time you looked at it, you felt a reminder pulse through your chest. This was what mattered. Not the house Ivy lost, not the receipts of betrayal, not the silence of former friends. What mattered was the quiet, steady love that had found its way into your life. You had stepped out of the shadow. And for the first time, you weren't afraid of the light. You pressed the drawing to your chest, tears blurring your vision. Life had taken much from you, but it had given you something precious in return. Proof that love, when given wisely, could still bloom. You knew then that betrayal didn't define you.